I wanted to do a fast update to bring you up to date on these GE electric clocks from the 515F All-American 5 radios I've been working on. These two are quote-unquote finished. They have real lubricated Telechron rotors in them, and I have polished these face plates, and I have repainted the hands. But the big thing I discovered when doing this work, which is important, is that my previous video recommended filling up the Telechron rotors with 2 milliliters of oil or 1.5 milliliters of oil. Turns out these rotors don't sit straight up and down in the clock. In my clock, anyway, they sit. The output shaft sits at 3 o'clock, which means that if you put 2 milliliters of oil in, it weeps out the hole. I mean, eventually it stops, but it's too much oil. And 1.5 leaked just a little bit, not as much as 2. So for I did 2 more rotors, and the difference with them is I just filled them up with 1 milliliter and 1.25 milliliter, which now seems to me to be a better value. So the idea was to take this apart, and I'll show you how I did that. So by way of explanation, just to show you how these are put together, you can back this outer ring off the back of the clock, and then you pry up these 4 tabs on the faceplate, and this lifts off. And then what I, of course, thought was paint for the numbers is actually this cardboard and was it wool ring. You can see on this one it's faded, but that's all it is. And then, of course, you can lift the glass to get to the hands. On the later models, it's kind of this cheap plasticky material. This isn't glass, and they have a little lip, so they're not as, the later ones are not as nice. This one is kind of in my reject bin because the dial wasn't printed very well, so this isn't very sharp. So I've been using this as an experimental clock and for testing paint and whatnot. If you had a little gumption, I don't have the proper prying tools to lift these press fit hands off, and I didn't want to try to take them off and put them back on. But if you can get behind this, then you could get to the gear mechanism on the back and lubricate it from this side, which would be easier, but I haven't done that. And then once they were apart, I wanted to address the hands, which looked ugly. And of course, they're radium hands, so you don't want to get that stuff in the air at all. So I mixed some white, yellow, and black modeling paint and acrylic paint and painted the radium and old crap in. And then I took modern glow paint, which of course doesn't work as well as the friendly atom, but I put that on there, so these do glow in the dark for a little while. It's not as, it won't glow indefinitely like the radioactive ones did, but it's okay. The other thing I found out about these clocks is that these top shafts, which is the set alarm, are reverse threaded, and the threads have a tendency to break off. So if you're buying one of these on eBay, it may not just be missing the knob. It may be that the shaft is broken off. And if that is the case, then these are pretty worthless. Later on, in 53 or so, it looks like GE switched to using, that they recognized this was a problem, and they switched to using a shaft with a notch in it to hold the knob. So these faceplates are really polished steel with a brass coating on top of it that's pretty thin. And this one was in pretty good shape, so I just polished it up with Brasso. This one had parts of the finish were gone. So here's a closer example of the dial face with where the brass finish is worn off. So I wound up using Simichrome polish, my favorite, and grinding off that coating. So this one's a little lighter. I don't know if you can see it in this light, and then I painted this one with hit this one with clear lacquer, and then knocked it down with some steel wool, and it came out really well, although it's not as a rich brass color as I'd like. I don't know in this light if you can see it, but it's going to look good in the red clock. So these are done, and they're quiet, and they're running nice now. And the only thing I haven't done is clean up these knobs. They've still got a little bit of dirt in them. So the other potential improvement to the process I mentioned in the last video was to seal up the hole you drill in the rotor to re-lubricate them with solder instead of epoxy, because the epoxy is hard to work with and takes a day to dry. And I gave that a shot on 2 more rotors, because I actually have 4 of these clocks now, and it's ridiculous. I have a 5th on the way because I needed to get a replacement post for one of the other clocks. In the end, I'm going to have 3 working clocks out of 5 parts cars, essentially. But anyway, soldering the hole shut. Okay, so I have 2 more rotors here. This one is from 1951 and this one is from 1950. And the copper one was a bit of a surprise when I took it out, and I shined it up with Brasso and made it look nice. These have been drilled, cleaned, and filled with oil as an experiment. This one has a milliliter in it and this one has a milliliter and a quarter. We'll see if it makes any operational difference. But the idea was epoxy was kind of a pain to seal these with. It takes a while to work with and then has to dry. So wanted to try soldering it, but as I mentioned in the last video, I was afraid if I soldered it facing up, solder might drip into the mechanism, and if I soldered it from the bottom, as I started to think about it, the oil would start to run out, which isn't any good. So I'm going to try to do it at like the 3 o'clock position. I don't know if that'll work. I've cleaned these surfaces with alcohol, so they are clean now. And I think what I'm going to do, I have this micro applicator, which they sell, this here, which they sell for putting on touch-up paint on automobiles, and I'm going to dip it into this RA flux. Get it? Yep. We'll just do one at a time here. We'll do the pretty one first, and I'm just going to put it around the edge and in the hole. We don't want to get any inside too much. We'll put this in the 3 o'clock position. And what I thought I'd do is I'd preheat it with the rework station a little bit to get it warm. And then hit it with a fat 800 degree iron. And here is some solder. That's the biggest I have. I guess it is. I don't have a big gun. And I'll try to do this so that you can see what I'm doing. So let's heat it up. This is 700 degree air. Of course, I'm going to blow my my flux away probably. I think I'll just load this up. And let's see what happens here. Well, that might do. It was a little fiddly, but let that cool off here. That doesn't look too bad, huh? let's heat it up first. Doesn't take much. Okay. I'm going to do this where I can see it, so I'm sorry it was a little hard to do it the other way. It's pretty warm. I worry about heating it like that, and it's kind of blobby. Seems like I could do a better job if I work on my technique a little bit, but let's see how they perform. I don't know how secure that is or how well it'll stand up to use. This was harder to solder than the copper one. Clean that up. I don't know how this will perform over time or how it'll stand up to use. It does stand proud of the case more than I'd like, and this is pretty warm, so I worry about heating these things that much too. I think now that this is cold, maybe I can cut off this this knob where I pulled the soldering iron away. That's okay. So I let the motors run continuously for 3 days and they seem to work fine. So now we're going to put it all together. The electricity on most of these comes in the two black wires, and then the switch is a post on the clock face, and the electricity comes out yellow wire to the rest of the radio. But on some of these later ones, this one's from 1958, the power goes in on the red and black wire and comes out on the yellow wire. All right, so let's put it together. You slide the ring up from the back, which is kind of fiddly and a pain. There's slots that you have to line up to clear the posts and let the 60-minute alarm timer swing out outside the body behind the unit. And then there's these 3 posts. And then this is a covering that goes around it, and that's actually for the alarm. That makes it vibrate and be real loud. So then you just drop the clock in through the front with the ring around it, and it'll kind of lock into place when it's in the right thing, and then slip the alarm shield on the back and tighten it down. And there you go. A nicely restored clock. So thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, and we'll have more videos for you soon.